Several years after graduating from law school, Michael Minot's free-thinking and anti-religious convictions collapsed. He's frequently asked what combination of truths was so powerful that they convinced a staunchly atheist attorney to abandon everything he previously thought true and become a believer in God. Well, the full answer is finally in print. The Beckoning, examining the truths that transformed an atheist attorney into a believer in God. I'm making a list of people, Michael, that I want to read this compelling case for faith. Now, you say in your book, God uses messengers to surround us with his voice.
Well, God doesn't just speak to us through the scriptures, although he certainly does that. But everything that he has created around us does the same thing. From the heavens to you and I, to the things that are around us, he has put things in place that are like fingerprints of himself that also communicate to us that not only is he there, but he's powerful and all-knowing.
You say in the book that the more you discovered, the more you wanted to learn the relationship of these messengers to each other. You found a big picture.
Well, at first it wasn't that way. I was finding little bits and pieces here and there that were amazing in and of themselves. But when the picture came together and the relationship between these messengers, it overwhelmed me. It was a jolt to me that I've never had before. So it challenged me to keep going and find further relationships between all these things that God has made for us.
You really gave science an equal platform with Scripture. You were examining the elements, the realities of what we know about science as you were looking into God's Word.
Well, as I was performing my investigation, I was most comfortable with science. And that's something that I had classes in from elementary school through college. And the scriptures were a little intimidating to me. So I read a lot about science, thinking that not only am I going to affirm what I thought about life, which is that we are naturally caused beings. There's not a supernatural cause for who we were. But again, I was also more comfortable with that. So reading the scriptures, which I was less familiar with and a little bit intimidated by, but also the science as well. So the combination of the two is what I did as far as investigating, and on both sides of those things, I came to understand that God speaks to us through both what he has created and what he has given us in his Word.
Thank you for giving us all the details in here. Oh, there's no way we're going to be able to unpack them all, but let's talk about that first messenger. You've already alluded to the supernatural fingerprint in nature. In the created world. Give us a couple of highlights.
Well, yesterday we talked about the solar system. So moving on from that, going from what we see in gigantic telescopes, now looking at what microscopes show us, that the amazing world of the cell and other small things, but particularly the cell, how much information God has put into each small little microscopic point. There's more than 3 billion sequenced bits of information that when coming together helps the cell perform all the functions that it does. Now in you and I, as adults, there is approximately 35 trillion of these cells that are all coordinating with each other to perform all the things that we do biologically as humans. It's outstanding. It's just mind-boggling. Now, on top of that, all of these cells, these 35 trillion, came from one cell. The information that was packed into that one cell caused division and multicellular coordination. It's just unfathomable.
And one cell is like a small city.
It is. There's so much there that then causes other things to happen from there. The division of cells into more and more, but then how they group together to do the different systems and perform the systems that are in our body. It's just outstanding.
I told you I'd make my case for the poet, and I could just read page after page. But you talk about nature, the implanted behavioral patterns of the birds that fly and the animals that... You say each creature sings its part in the harmony of nature's never-finished song.
Well, the more
Did you think like that before you came to Christ? That's what I want to know.
Well, certainly not. I mean, again, the explanation that most biologists would give is that everything we see around us, including ourselves, is caused by natural selection, meaning that there was an initial life, and there's been a sequence over a very, very long period of time of improvement of those lives because of little slices that occur each mutation, so to speak. So that's a gist of what the theory of macroevolution is as given to us by Darwin. So from that, I didn't come into my investigation excuse me, believing that there was some coordinated activity and that one architect and engineer had given us all these things around us and how they work together with each other. And so these implanted behaviors in animals and even in us, because we are social beings wanting to love each other, that'd be an example of one of our implanted behaviors. It's just something I found as one of the many, many, many ways that we can look and see God's fingerprint around us.
And I'm glad you've given me all the details to support the reality that man, the pinnacle of God's creation, follows every other creation that really was just preparing the nursery for us. I love it. I love it. The scriptures, you say you discovered treasure when you opened yourself up to the Lord and to the truths revealed in His living and active Word. Certainly worked that way in your life.
Well, the first question I had was whether the scriptures are even true or not. I thought they might even just be ancient fables or some series of do's and don'ts. But the accuracy of them, as far as being historically accurate, much less accurate for our lives, was a big question of mine. And as I reviewed the prophecies and the miracles and other types of proofs that the scriptures give to show that they can be relied upon, were things that I had not only had never investigated that before, but it's absolutely amazing. How can there be, on the prophecy side of things, how can there be hundreds of predictions and that they come true to the extent that we've had those events occur? There are some prophecies that have yet to happen, but to the extent those events have happened so far and they be accurate to the detail, then what other explanation could there be other than God showing us that through His Word that He is authenticating His words with prophecies?
You give a whole chapter to Jesus Himself. I mean, what a treasure. And you say conversations with the Creator became ours daily. You found a love relationship.
Well, there's some things I learned about Jesus that I didn't know from my elementary school reading. I did go to church with my parents when I was younger, and so I had a chance to read some of the Gospels and some other provisions within the New Testament. But I did not pay attention to a lot of the things that I was reading and had lots of questions otherwise that I just kind of left on the table. But when I started reading the Gospels in detail, one of the things that really impressed me was the emotional character of Jesus, how He wept for those who were hurting, how He laughed with the children, just on and on how emotional He was. There was a scene at what we would refer to as the Last Supper, and He was eating dinner with His disciples, with the followers. And there was one point where the gospel narrative was writing about something else primarily, but there's a significant subplot whereby John laid his head on Jesus' chest, and they had a brief conversation about something that was occurring, which is, again, the main part of the story. But to have that occur just shows the extreme confidence and love between Jesus and one of His followers, that would even occur. And it led me to believe, in addition to other things that I saw, of what a tremendous, loving person Jesus was. So having conversations with someone who is that loving was something that followed later on when I finally determined that Jesus was real, that He is our Creator.
Takes you out of the religion mold, doesn't it? And invites you.
The word religion to me is some kind of stale type of thing where you might say yes, that's more likely than not to be true or not. But I didn't read the Bible that way at all. I read the story of God creating us and then sending Jesus, and Jesus doing what He did to then call us to this everlasting life. And everlasting life is not just being free from the temptations we have in this life, but is this incredible relationship whereby we're called to be His bride in Revelation. So the gathering of all the believers will then come together to be His bride. So we'll be joined together and joined with Him in ways we can only imagine. And to me, that's the heartbeat of what the Gospels and the overall Scriptures are saying.
That's why in one of your messengers, you actually called death the greatest day. Quote, like a lighthouse beckoning ships in from the seas, the reality of eternity calls us home. Death is part of the beckoning because of what you've illustrated, where it takes us, what has been prepared for us. Oh, let me just read one more, because I'm making my case too, Mr. Attorney. In the course of nature's choreographed performance, God issues His ongoing invitation for each of us to join the music and draw near to Him. Indeed, some who have taken the time to truly listen now dance to the music with endless joy. I have to take us to a messenger that some people will cite as the reason they will not consider a good and loving God, and that is the problem of pain. You refer to the education of pain. You and your wife have faced what for some must seem the ultimate pain and loss, the death of a child. How did this affect your faith, your relationship with the Lord?
Well, before even entering the investigation that I write about in The Beckoning, I had 3 high school friends, my best friends, that do anything for each other types of friends. And they had passed away in separate incidences as well. And so this, along with other issues, were part of my prejudices against the scriptures, Christianity, religion kind of thing. It was all something that I just kept at bay and wanted to pursue other things other than investigating that. But since becoming a believer, then my son Connor died. And so there's always a challenge, and I've determined that we're never going to know all the whys. There has never been an expert that knows everything about pain. That's just not something God has given us. And I've determined that from all the things that He does give us, that He is absolutely loving and knowledgeable about all the things that are taking place in our lives. And from the scriptures, when James says that to consider it joy when we enter into pain because it matures and completes us, and Paul talking about all the pains that he went through, saying that that kept him humble because God apparently pulled Paul out for a very, very special purpose. And that type of purpose could have caused him to be boastful, but instead his pain caused him to be more humble. So pain works in us in ways that are mysterious but yet good. And also look at what happened to Jesus in the last 24 hours of his life. When he was scourged and then put on the cross for 6 to 9 hours, we cannot imagine. We can say we can only imagine, but I would say we cannot imagine the excruciating, deep pain that took place in one person's life. And so if in fact the greatest day in humanity, which is the salvation of man, occurred with so much pain, I have to leave open the possibility that pain works wonders to us when we respond properly in our lives.
Oh, I bet you would like to hear more of this. And it's all here. And thank you. Each chapter closes with great questions for group discussion. The last one on page 140, I think is very timely. Let me just share that one with you and give you pause. How does the reality of heaven help you cope with global turmoil and personal circumstances? There's the big picture. And quoting your former pastor when you were living in Florida, Dr. Larry Thompson, First Baptist Church, Fort Lauderdale, he says, page after page, so many insights I never considered before. And he says, I've been a Christ follower for more than 40 years, an outstanding read. You ready for a challenge? If you are a Christian, if you're a believer, you are going to be so encouraged because all of the details, the evidence, the scientific support for what God has always declared in His Word is here, thanks to years of work. And if you're not a believer, why not take a chance? Open up that thinking. And, someone said an open mind collects more riches than an open purse. And there are riches here. Great argument for a truth that will change your life if you're open. Michael, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Only the beginning. Brand new book, 2015. We're going to be seeing more of you.
Look forward to coming back.